This conference will now be recorded.
That's true. Oh, are you ready to give up? I'll jump in. Bonus for coming.
All right, are we ready? So this portion of our presentation is part of, we're going to call it a legal block. And there's a couple of things, several things that we want to get out of this, want you to get out of this. And the first thing is this is not meant to scare you. It's not meant as a threat. These are just topics that we talk about that you need to know that can get you, your nursing home, your owner in trouble if you're not careful, all right? So John and I, this is Supervisory Agent John Carnell. He is, has done abuse and neglect, exploitation for 8 years now. If you want an expert in the state on this topic, it's probably John.
Use a mouse pointer, click on the from the mouse probably. Click on it.
Okay. All right, my name is Mykel Fry. I am the Director of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Again, this is John Carnell. He is our Supervisory Agent. We work for the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is Mike Hunter. He is a statewide elected official.
I don't.
Okay. So what we do is Medicaid, not Medicare. We are, just as a rule of thumb, and you can use this however you want, Medicaid is for poor people, Medicare is for old people. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but in the statutes, the title of the statute that we work out of is called poor persons. And the unit was established in 1989. We investigate and prosecute cases involving, of course, Medicaid fraud, but it's abuse, neglect, exploitation, drug diversion in long-term care facilities, long-term board and care facilities. So the technical definition of a board and care facility is 2 or more unrelated adults who receive a substantial amount of their care from an LPN, an RN, some type of nursing. Our funding, and this part right here is on the slide because we have to, because of our funding, but it is 75% federal grant and another 25% is state matching money. The state matching money at this point is what our unit recovers in civil suits. And so at this point in time, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit does not cost the state any money. So we are self-funded, basically. If you want to know what those dollar amounts are, that's the link. So Medicaid, the budget for the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, which is the checkbook for Medicaid, is over $5 billion. So for last year, for FY 2020, the budgeted amount was $6 billion. That is, of that, $5 billion goes out to providers, and that's going to be all providers, including nursing homes. So it's easy to see how this is a huge program that could be misused if not handled properly. And we'll talk as we go as far as Medicaid, some of the things that could get you in trouble for Medicaid fraud. But for the most part, our presentation today is about abuse and neglect. The Attorney General's office has 2 offices, Oklahoma City and Tulsa. John is from the Tulsa area, and we have jurisdiction in all 77 counties. So unlike a local DA where they're restricted to their area, we're not. We can go all over the state, and we do. We also investigate providers, not recipients. So if you've got somebody that owns a Mercedes and a mansion and, they want to get on Medicaid, they may be able to, even knowing that, but that's not our job. We don't look at that. We look at the providers and you guys. All right, the FUCU investigations. John?
All right, we're going to talk about the investigations a little bit here. We investigate physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, financial exploitation, neglect, drug diversion, which is a technical term. If somebody gets charged for with that, it's going to be the larceny of a controlled dangerous substance. So just keep that in mind. And then we got the Medicaid fraud, the false billing, cost report fraud, and your staffing levels. Referrals, we get our referrals in our unit from many, many different sources. These are some of the most ways that we get them. It's the family members. They go into the facilities, they see something wrong, they call us. You got the current or former employees. And then we have local law enforcement, which is your police departments. If they get called out on a incident, they'll usually call us and have us to take the investigation over because we do specialize in these investigations. Then you have the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, OKDHS, Adult Protective Services, State Department of Health, our local prosecutor's office. I know in Tulsa County, if they get one of these cases, they'll ship it over to our office to let us handle it. And then we have the hotline, which is citizen complaints, and they can call that anytime they want to. Some of these freebies that some of you guys can get today will have our hotline number on it. So that's the number we're talking about. Referrals continued as if you send a referral to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, you have to understand the jurisdictional limitations. There are some cases that we will, we do work and will work, but there are some cases that we aren't able to work. Issues that constitute a criminal investigation and then a referral to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit does not necessarily mean it's going to go anywhere. It could be closed depending on, or referred out depending on what the facts are. But don't be afraid to refer. That's the biggest thing to take from this slide, okay? Do not be afraid to refer. Actually, I would say report. Report's a better word, okay? Report to us anything that you have that's going on. It could be a criminal investigation inside your facility. This is another way, pretty recent, I think, within the past couple of years that we've gotten. You can make a referral. You can go to our website. It's oag.ok.gov. Go where it says Citizen Resources. And then you go to the Medicaid Fraud tab there and find the MFUCU. By the way, if you hear us say MFUCU, that's Medicaid Fraud Control. That's kind of our little slogan. But you go to there to find the complaint form, and then you can fill out that complaint form online, okay? We highly suggest anybody fill that report out. Don't ever stop someone from filling that out. If they come to you and say, hey, I think we should report this, say, okay, I'll do it, or, let them do it. And then that's a way to submit it. So what does the law say about abuse, neglect, and exploitation? This is where we'll get into the really good stuff. Nursing home administrator alert. I'm going to shorten this up right here. This pretty much says that nursing home, as an administrator, you as an administrator in that nursing home, the weight of that nursing home sits on your shoulders, okay? Everything that happens in that nursing home, you're responsible for ultimately, okay? Who are we talking about? Who is a vulnerable adult? Can anybody answer that for me? A resident. Ooh, you summed that up pretty good. That's how I like that short and sweet answer. Yeah, it's basically any incapacitated person, which is going to be a resident in a long-term board and care facility. Okay, they're relying on that direct care services to keep them alive and help them with their daily living needs. Substantially impaired in the ability to provide adequate care for him or herself, unable to manage his or her property or financial affairs, and then meets requirements for mental, physical health needs, or unable to protect him or herself, okay, from any type of harm. Simply, there you go. Any resident in the nursing home, you summed it up. Who are the caretakers? The caretakers are going to be your RNs, CNAs. I'm not sure why. Yellow. Microsoft Word.
I know, they can do that.
CAN. That's supposed to be CAN, is supposed to be certified nurse aid, CNA. Administrators, any direct care staff, your LPN, CMAs, and dietary managers. And there's some more that we don't have listed here. If they're providing direct care services, then they're going to be qualified as a caretaker and are subject to certain types of prosecutions. Now, what about your kitchen staff, your maintenance staff, your housekeeping? Are they going to be considered caretakers? You would think so. Most people do think so, but they're not going to be actually fall under that definition of a caretaker. Okay, but they're still subject to being charged with crimes as well. So I think we'll touch on it here a little bit.
Yeah, well, one thing with that though is just per se, they are not a caretaker. But like the slide before said, if you assume that responsibility, then yes, that makes you one. So if you've got the laundry person is walking down the hall and they see somebody on the floor and they go in and they pick that person up, they've made themselves a caretaker. All right, they're not normally, but if somebody falls, you got to do assessments and things like that. If they just go pick them up without having any of that, then they've assumed that role.
Or sometimes maintenance or housekeeping may have their nurse aid certification or their med aid certification. Okay, so if they have that certification, they can be classified as well. What is abuse? It's the causing or the permitting of the infliction of physical pain or injury, sexual abuse, or sexual exploitation, unreasonable restraint or confinement, mental anguish, or personal degradation, or the deprivation of nutrition, clothing, shelter, health care, or other care services, without which serious physical or mental injury is likely to occur. By the way, just so you know, we're not making this stuff up. Is this thing got a laser on it? All right, there. So those numbers right there. Those are actually the state statute numbers. All right. So we're not setting up here lying to you. That's 63 from the state statute 1-1902. What is abuse? Continued is the willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or punishment. We think you just went over these. Resulting physical harm and impairment or mental anguish. Oh, is it? Oh, I guess I should have paid attention to the statute numbers. So cell phones in the workplace. Is that an issue? Could that be an issue? It is a big issue, and that's something that we've been combating over the last few years. If you'll see right here, these are actual headlines, articles that was written for newspapers and news articles. Nursing assistant fired, charged after posting new video of 93-year-old on Snapchat. And then down here, you got the nursing home workers share explicit photos of residents on Snapchat. It's becoming more common, unfortunately. Our office has worked several cases involving people going and snapping photos of nude residents and sharing them with friends and making fun of residents and stuff like that. That is unacceptable. So we tell everybody, as administrators or the administration of the nursing facilities, you really need to create a policy limiting the usage of cell phones in your facilities. Okay, if you don't have one already, make sure you get one. No cell phone usage while caring for residents. A prime example is if you have a nurse in there taking care of a resident and they've had to roll that resident over to maybe change out the bed pad, or maybe it's the nurse aide changing the bed pad out and they're on their cell phone, and that cell phone goes to fall, what do you think they're going to do? That resident's probably going to start rolling because they're going to take their hands off that resident to try to catch that $1,000 cell phone, right? And that resident's probably going to hit the floor, or a lot of it hit the floor, become injured. That's what we're trying to prevent by having these policies, all right? So no video recording of residents at all, no photos of residents. If the facility wants to have photos taken of residents, you should have your own camera to do that for the facility. Make sure you have all the proper documentation for that. And then the only time cell phones are allowed is for emergency uses or just on the employee breaks, okay?
Yeah, and if I understood this, your organization covers or investigate abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, exploitation, neglect,
Yeah.
negligence, and other fraud. How does the cell phone policy falls under that.
So easy answer for that is, if you're putting that resident at any unreasonable risk of harm, that is neglect, okay? That is neglect. So, or if you've taken photos of nude residents and sharing those, that's going to be could be sexual exploitation, it could be fall into the sexual acts.
Well, and the next slide actually is going to talk to you about personal degradation, which is in the abuse statutes. So when we talk about cell phones and their use in the nursing homes, John will cover that in just a second, but it's also a form of abuse.
I was thinking that it falls under HIPAA. That's what I thought.
That's another, yes.
So,
a violation of HIPAA is a misdemeanor. Most of the time, it's not really enforced unless it's just really egregious. But again, going back to our personal degradation, there are some things that use of a cell phone or use of photographic material is not. I mean, like it is not a personal degradation, and that's up here. That's coming up as well.
Yeah, but if you have an employee on that cell phone and that resident gets injured because of them being on that cell phone, being distracted, that's going to be neglect by a caretaker, and that's a felony charge. You're going to see that in a minute, okay? So that's kind of why, like Mykel said, the HIPAA is a misdemeanor. We're going to go after the more severe punishment in a sense. Personal degradation, it's an act which the caretaker knew or should have known would cause shame, degrade, humiliate, or otherwise harm the personal dignity of a vulnerable adult. That includes the taking, transmitting, or display of electronic image.
One thing important on this is when you're dealing with folks in a nursing home, they may or may not be able to express shame or humiliation, or they may not even know that it happened. And so the rule of thumb on this is if it would embarrass you, then it should not be on the video, right? So it is kind of a subjective standard where it is, if it would embarrass the normal person, then it's a violation of the law. And then John will talk to you a little bit about what it's not.
It does not include images for reporting abuse to law enforcement, the Department of Human Services, or regulatory agencies that oversees the caretakers or enforces abuse and neglect laws. Treatment or diagnosis are part of an ongoing investigation. Okay, so if a photo is taken of a resident to send to a physician to try to get the physician to see what's going on with that resident and make a determination of diagnosis or whatnot, that is not going to fall under that personal degradation issue. Okay. Back then, I think it was November of last year, if I remember correctly, they actually changed the rules for that, where you could take photos of the resident's injuries and transmit those to the physicians, okay, for diagnosis. I would say to try to keep the whole HIPAA under wraps, you may not want to take a whole body shot if you don't have to of that resident. You may just take a photo of the resident's wound and send to the physician. That way, if you accidentally sent that to the wrong phone number, there's no face or any identifying issues there. Okay, so use your best judgment on that, but it is okay now to send photos electronically to your physicians. As you guys already know, physicians are kind of spread very thin amongst nursing homes. And so this kind of makes it easier and more helpful, and it kind of gets the treatment a little bit quicker for resident.
John, we've talked about abuse, and we're about to talk about some neglect. And the difference between the two is that abuse, we look at it as it's an overt act. So it's a strike, a kick, a slap, something like that. And a neglect is the omission of an act. So you didn't do something you should have done. So John, if you would give me a couple examples of an abuse that we've worked.
Gosh.
I
know, I'm trying to think here. It's been a while since I've done this presentation, actually.
Well, and one of them is like a mental abuse. So talk about the nursing home where they had the baby doll.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, good point. So I worked a case down in southeastern Oklahoma. If you've been in a nursing home for a little while, you have your residents have Alzheimer's, and some of them carry around baby dolls, right? And they carry around baby dolls because with the Alzheimer's disease, they start reverting back to their younger days, having their children or whatnot. Well, this lady had a baby doll. She actually named him Rufus. She believed this baby doll was her real child. Okay, she fed it. When I went and took photographs of that baby doll, instead of real food caked in its mouth from where she'd been feeding it, she clothed it, she bathed him. She even at times pretended to give birth to this child. All right, she'd lay in bed, put her feet up. The nursing staff would come and actually pretend to deliver this child. By the way, that's quality care. If you get down to that level and help them feel comfortable, that's quality care. But we had a couple of CNA boys that didn't quite see what quality care was. They went in knowing how she felt about this baby. I mean, they'd taken care of this lady for at least 6 months that I could prove. They go into this lady's room and they take that baby doll away from her and they start playing toss back and forth to each other with that doll. What do you think that resident started doing? Started crying, started panicking, right? That wasn't funny enough for these two boys. They smashed that doll's head in front of that resident. Yeah, now she's panicked. She is screaming, somebody help, help my baby. She really believes her child is dying before her eyes. So that's one type of abuse, with the mental abuse side that we want. You know, and unfortunately, when you're going to be in this job for a while, hopefully you're going to see some of this stuff happening. It's unbelievable what people do. But anything else? Well, you were right on. I was my mind flipped. I'm like, oh. So what is neglect? Failure to provide protection for a vulnerable adult who is unable to protect his or her own interests. Failure to provide a vulnerable adult with adequate shelter, nutrition, health care, or clothing. Negligent acts or omissions. So that's very, very important to keep in mind there. It's negligent acts or omissions. That means you just don't do anything. That result in harm, or like I said earlier, it doesn't have to necessarily create harm, but the unreasonable risk of harm. So neglect can be very easy to get to, okay, while caring for these residents. And then you have the inaction, or lack of supervision. Failure to provide goods and or services necessary to avoid physical harm, mental anguish, or mental illness. We've seen cases where basically the omissions. We had a case just right over, not too far from here. You know, the nurse aide who was assigned to this hall didn't go into this resident's room at all her whole shift. She just completely neglected that resident. She never went in there to change her briefs. She never went in there to change the bed pads, the sheets, nothing. Didn't go in there to toilet her. The ladies up there and basically urinated and defecated all over the place. And you know, the next shift came on and realized what happened. So we get the case, and during the investigation, it was asked of that nurse aide, why did you not go in that room? You know, her answer was, well, she didn't have family that comes and sees her, so I didn't think I needed to go in there. You know, that's pretty sad that people go there. But
Well, and one other thing that you absolutely are going to come across is I'm supposed to go every 2 hours and check on these people. Well, I didn't go every 2 hours, I went every 3, and it's going to be because staffing levels. You absolutely are going to confront that, and you, as an administrator, need to figure out what you're going to do about that. You know, especially in this pandemic where we've got people that don't want to show up. You know, they're afraid they're going to get it, or they're going to give, you know, this virus. And so it is a fine line that you're going to have to walk on, you know, what kind of care do I provide, you know, with the staff that I have, or do I need to go get more staff? So just remember that your CNAs, CMAs are going to throw you under the bus. Maybe not every time, but there's going to be times when they're going to say, I didn't have a choice. I had to care for this person, or, you know, I had too many people that I was trying to oversee. And ultimately that could come back to you. So just be aware. That's a danger.
another case that I personally worked in, not too far from here, was an LPN. It was the end of her shift. She worked graveyard shift. She was tired. I get it. There was a resident who started screaming for help. To make a long story short, and I know this because I watched the video the facility had cameras, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. If you don't have cameras, the facility gets them. But I watched the video, and it also had audio on it. This resident screamed for help for over 20 minutes while that nurse walked up and down the hall and never stepped foot in that room. She didn't really have an excuse because she wasn't doing a whole lot, right? At one time, she stood across the hall with her foot on the wall while she drank her bottle of water across from the room where the resident was screaming for help. Is that a problem? It is a big problem. That lady could have been actively dying and wanting somebody to come in there and help her, and she was left by herself. Another nurse aide, the lady ends up actually trying to get out of bed on her own. She couldn't, but she tried. She hits the floor. You can hear it on the video camera. You hear the snap when she hits the floor. The nurse calls for a nurse aide to come down and help her, right? The nurse aide's walking by this resident's room, sees the resident laying on the floor. She looks at the nurse and says, "Hey, did you know Miss So-and-so's on the floor?" What do you think the nurse does? "Don't worry about it. Get down here and help me." Yeah, right? Another problem. The nurse aide says, "Okay," walks off and goes and helps the nurse. Later on in the video, the nurse and another nurse aide is at the med cart. That nurse aide had knowledge the lady was in the floor because she asked the nurse, "I still need to go pick Miss So-and-so off the floor. This lady's laid on the floor for several minutes." We charged the nurse and those two nurse aides, okay? A lot of people ask us, well, why didn't you charge the first nurse aide? Because, the nurse told her to come over and help her. Well, it doesn't matter. That nurse aide has an obligation to ensure the safety of those residents, right? And she failed to do that by just ignoring what was going on. And so we charged both of them and all three of them, and they were all charged and found guilty in the courts. So yeah, it can definitely, stack up real fast on the neglect side of things, again, because you have the unreasonable risk of harm in there, which I'm happy our state has that wording in there. As we are protecting our elderly and our vulnerable adults. Financial neglect. Failure to use the resources available to restore or maintain the health of a vulnerable adult by squandering and mismanaging their money, property, or accounts, refusing to pay for necessities in a timely manner, and then providing substandard care to a vulnerable adult despite the availability of adequate resources.
So something on this that I want to kind of bring to your attention and that we come across quite frequently is the financial neglect may be somebody's refusal to pay your bill, pay for the care of this person. One of the things that we come across is we get residents that sign over their financial affairs. So they get a power of attorney or there's a guardianship. And I think we talk about it later, but we'll talk a little bit about it now. So a power of attorney is a document in which the board, the person that's signing it over, that's their choice. That's their option. I want you to be my power of attorney, and I want you to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So I want you to be able to do my banking, my medicine, if I want to, sell my house, and it can be it can be very expansive. A guardianship is a court-ordered guardian. So it is somebody that there's been a petition with the court that this person is incompetent. And so they find, the court makes a finding, and then there's letters of guardianship entered. And so, but that person, your resident, may not have a choice who that is. So setting those two things aside, the power of attorney and the guardianship, if somebody wants to give somebody else authority over their bank statement, and they are in their right mind, they are competent, they can do that. They can absolutely do that. The stimulus checks that we got back in April, I guess, that's a great example. That money is not trust fund money. It doesn't go as to eligibility for Medicaid or anything else. It's their money, and they can do what they want to with it. And so why this is important at this point is just because someone's not getting their bills paid doesn't necessarily mean they're being neglected. If they turn that responsibility over to somebody else, and then they are also saying, yeah, whether you pay it or not, That's not a neglect. And the reason why I say that is we had this referral just last week. Somebody called and said, guy from Missouri has power of attorney, or at least has responsibility, and he's just not paying the bills, and we're about to kick her out. Well, they get to check, and the administrator gets to check in a little bit, and they go talk to the resident. She goes, oh yeah, no, I told him not to pay. Told him not to pay your bill. And so she had to explain, that's going to get you evicted, you got to pay. And it was cleared up after that. So message here is somebody can they can spend their money how they want, as long as they're competent. And then a power of attorney or a guardianship, letters of guardianship, if that is available, you should always have that in the file. Always. All right.
Yeah, so financial neglect is really going to be on your shoulders as administrator and the administration side of things, okay? Because typically you won't have your nurse aides, your med aides, your LPNs going in there handling this business, right? It's going to be your business office managers and you, right? And so, you know, when you're dealing with people's money, follow every rule by the book as much as you can, okay? I mean, because this can get you in trouble really quick as an administrator. We've seen administrators go out and like, well, they need to spend down their account because if not, they're not going to be eligible for Medicaid any longer. Let's go buy some recliners for the common area of the nursing home. Oh, we need a new freezer for the kitchen. You can't do that, okay? All that money is in those accounts, and that's the residents' money. It's not for the facility, okay? It's for their care and stuff. What is verbal abuse? Repeated use of words or any forms of communication that are intended to humiliate, intimidate, cause shame, fear, embarrassment, or degradation to the person entrusted with care of that caretaker. This is easy to get to as well. I mean, I tell nurse aides and LPNs and stuff all the time that when I teach them, you know, if you're standing in front of a resident, but you're talking to a coworker, not necessarily talking to that resident, but they're eavesdropping. You guys know residents like to be a part of everything. And you tell your coworker a dirty joke, and it causes that resident to be embarrassed, you just committed a crime. It's that easy. Okay, so I tell people all the time, be careful what you say, what you do. You know, be professional when you're in there taking care of those elderly folks. Language, gestures, actions, behaviors. That's what can get you in trouble with verbal abuse. Signs of abuse, some of these are pretty common. You know, the bruises, cuts, and burns, pressure marks, or bed sores. Now, we get, some people are like, well, you know, people, they do get bed sores, right? They're elderly. When we get complaints of bed sores and things like that, we don't just come in looking just to see who we can throw in jail, all right? I tell people all the time, if I can prove you're innocent, I'm gonna prove you're innocent. But if you're guilty, I'll prove that too. We understand bed sores can show up because a lot of the vulnerable populations are malnourished, you know, and things like that, and it's hard to really cure that. It's how does you as a facility, how are you handling that situation? Is your nursing staff actually providing treatments? Are they actually in there, you know, calling the doctor when there's a change in condition? So that is where you'll keep people out of trouble. Bed sores that are caused by neglect is a different issue. That's where you're going to definitely find yourself in hot water if you're neglecting folks and they're just sitting there rotting away in their beds. I know that's kind of a harsh way to put it, but it does happen, unfortunately. Dehydration, malnutrition, overly medicated or sedated, we call that chemical restraints. Lack of normal grooming, personality changes. And then also with what we talked about earlier, for like the verbal side of abuse up there as well.
Yeah, sure.
What's it doing?
Your magic goes on.
My magic wore off. Financial exploitation, you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So financial exploitation is generally, everybody knows about trust funds, right? I mean, we just talked about it a little bit, but it is basically, it is any time when somebody takes anything, money, property, for their use and not the use of the resident. We talked just now about power of attorney and guardianships, and some of those may be different. But it is when you're in a nursing home and you've got a CNA that, I'll give you an example of one of our cases. So we had a CNA whose daughter was about to have a baby, and she goes to the resident. The resident was there for just like skilled nursing. She wasn't incapacitated in any way other than she just needed therapy. And so CNA goes in and she says, yeah, she's down in the desk. My daughter's going to have a baby and I need to throw her a shower and I can't really do that. Well, the lady, the resident, gives her a credit card and says, well, go get what you need. Well, she ends up getting not only party supplies, but like a crib and a car seat. I mean, she just went crazy at Walmart. And so we charged her with financial exploitation for a couple of reasons that we'll get into in just a minute. But one of them is you're a CNA, you can't ask for anything. And the main reason is right here. Undue influence or duress. Because if you've got somebody caring for you in a nursing home, you are their caretaker. It's just like a child almost, where do they really have a choice? I mean, if they feel like they're not going to be cared for, they're going to be abused. If they don't agree, that's undue influence or duress. And remember, it's not just money. Out in Western Oklahoma, we had an administrator that there was a resident in the nursing home, and the administrator was contacted by some other folks because this person had a house here in Oklahoma City, and the resident went over, or the administrator went over and had her sign her deed, had her sign her house away. She didn't know that she was what she was doing, but because of his position, it's automatically an undue influence or duress. So there's also deception, intimidation, and I want, a lot of this is intuitive. If you take money from somebody that really can't make those decisions for themselves, and you use it for your benefit, or you use it for the benefit of the nursing home or somebody other than this person, then it's an exploitation. Everybody, and that means anybody that works in a nursing home, stands in a position of trust, simply because the resident is unlikely to be able to care for themselves without your help. That makes you a position of trust. Recognizing financial exploitation. So in the case that I gave you, the example that I gave you where the lady gave over her credit card, she was very competent. And she looked at her statements and said, oh, that's not right. And so she was able to report it. But one of the things that we find in nursing homes and even other long-term care facilities, boarding care facilities, is the unauthorized use of a credit card. We've got folks that their credit cards end up coming up missing. Well, the first thing that you need to do is report that to the police, because for example, we had one where it's the same thing, when the credit card came up missing. It's reported to the police, and the police go look at the bank statements. They get with the bank. There's been like 5 or 6 ATM withdrawals that morning, so they're able to pull the camera. They can get to the ATM camera. So if there's a delay in reporting, you may not always get to that camera. So it's really important to be proactive. If somebody's got a credit card or somebody has cash, which they have the right to have those things, it's just, it kind of makes your job really hard, because you have to kind of, if there's been personal belongings, gifts to caregivers. We'll talk about that in just a minute. There are certain circumstances where you can give gifts, but again, we'll talk about that. But the ATM card use is really what's important. When we're talking about, one of the things that is that we find on exploitation is your business office manager. So my advice to you, as I tell you right now, is never, ever, ever leave trust fund accounting in the hands of a single person. You may trust that business office manager, but what you don't know is that business office manager has a gambling problem. And this is a true story. And so the next thing you know, the trust funds are being, they're siphoned off, and the next thing you know, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars missing. And so always, if there's if you do have a bookkeeper, then go back over the books with them. You may not know how debits and credits work, assets equals liability plus owner's equity. That doesn't matter. Have them sit down and explain it to you. Look at the bank statements. Is there something unusual there? Establish these checks and balances. And then always, especially when you're talking about trust funds, is there's a good way to do record keeping. And if I'm not mistaken, you're going to have somebody talk to you, or they already have talked to you about how to keep those books. Do I keep one single account? Do I keep individual accounts for each individual resident? I'll leave that up to you guys. If it were me, I would do individual accounts. And that is because, you may have a lot of residents and a lot of accounts, but it is so easy to skim off the top when you have to drill down to see who has, Miss Smith has this much and Mr. Jones has this much. Where if you've got one account, it's like, why did Mrs. Smith, who has been to the hospital this last week, now she took out $500? That doesn't make sense, right? Okay. Here we're talking about the trust funds. I've kind of already gone over that. Keep the trust fund account separate from the nursing home accounts. And the reason for that is some of the nursing home accounts really, in the end, belong to the owner. Trust funds belong to the residents. Two different people own those, so keep them separate. Don't ever mingle those.
Well, and as if you don't already know, with the trust funds, you have to have that account set up in a specific way, and there's interest that accrues on some of those accounts, so you have to divide that out. So make sure you follow the state regs for that, and don't deviate from that, because again, it'll get you in trouble as an administrator for messing up those books. Okay.
And my recommendation, and I know this is hard, but if the owner of your facility comes to you and says, I'm short on payroll, I need you to take that money out of the trust funds, transfer it over, we get our money from Medicare tomorrow, we'll get it we'll get it back. I would encourage you to rethink that. And that's another true story that has actually happened, for the reason of the interest. Is really, there was no harm. Nobody lost any money, but there was an interest issue. And you gotta, the state regs tell you gotta do it. All right. So here's the part about solicitation by a caregiver. So the lady that was asking for the money for the baby shower, you cannot ask for anything greater than $1. If you do, you have broken the law. It's just that simple. A caregiver in this situation does not include a guardian or limited guardian. Does anybody know why? Because guardians and limited guardians can be paid for their services. So they can actually take some money.
Touch on that real fast. So when it says cannot give or receive, okay, or receive from a resident, we hear all the time the CNA goes in the room and having that conversation while they're caring for that resident, and they just happen to just tell the resident just how how their kids are at home without food, or they need some new tires on their cars. They just don't know how they're going to pay for it. And the resident says, "Oh, sweetheart, let me help you out. Let me give you some money." Well, they didn't necessarily ask her for that money, did they? But the resident gave it. Doesn't matter. That resident, as a caretaker, they cannot receive any money or property from that resident that's greater than $1, because that's how some people try to work it. They know these elderly folks are very kind-hearted, and they don't want to see somebody suffering. So they'll start shelling out some money, and they're deceptive. They go in there, they work their little trickery, and I don't know what I'm going to do for my kids. That doesn't work. Can't do that.
Yeah, and that's true. You can't receive any money. So what about gifts? I said earlier, there might be an exception for gifts. Is there an exception? Right. Short answer is yes. So you can get a group of individuals. So like the family members can say, Christmas bonus. We wanted to get together and we want to give the staff a bonus. They can do that, but the provider cannot be included in the decision-making process, and there has to be a procedure or a policy for the distribution of the funds. So a couple of years ago, we had a nursing home that in their the letter that they sent out for the invoicing for their daily care, there was a piece of paper in there that said, please give to the fund. Well, it was supposed to be for the independent living people were supposed to be the ones that really got this. Well, everybody ended up getting it. So skilled nursing, just the nursing care residents. And so it had a tone of almost extortion. So here's your bill, and by the way, we want you to give to our residents. And so what we ended up doing, we didn't file any charges in that, but what we ended up doing was talking to the nursing home administrator and saying, you need to stay out of it, because he was the one that was divvying up the money. And we said, you need to stay out of that process. Family members, if you have a council, the council can do that. You need to stay out because this is bad juju. You shouldn't be doing this. And he agreed. Okay, so let's switch over just a little bit. Does anybody have let's stop for me. Anybody have any questions about anything that we've talked about so far?
Yeah, I have a question. From the beginning, we talk about refer. You mentioned about refer. And I was wondering why you decided to choose the word referral instead of complaint.
Because we get referrals from Oklahoma City Police Department. We get, when we say it's a referral, we've gotten them from OIG before. So it's not necessarily a complaint of a bad, that something has happened. It is the police were called out and now we're referring it to you to decide if you're even going to open it. Does that make sense? All right, so anybody else, real quickly? Just trying to see if there were any questions. There is, I can see it. All right, so let's talk just briefly about Medicaid fraud. And early on, we talked about Medicaid fraud is in your cost reporting and your, the per diem rates that you receive. It's also could be in your staffing levels. So I am not the expert on staffing levels, so I'm not really going to delve into that other than what I said earlier, which is you don't have enough people to take care of your residents and it's your fault. That's a neglect for you. What I will say as far as Medicaid fraud, one of the things that happens, if I remember correctly, it's the Department of Health every other year does it's not a survey, it's actually a financial audit on your expense reports. And so you have direct care expenses and then you have indirect care expenses. And the direct care expenses statewide determines your per diem rates. So it is unlikely that budgeting on your cost reports is going to affect the daily rate, the per diem rate very much. And the reason why is it's a little bit technical, but if you throw a party for your daughter, her wedding, and you're going to throw this nice big wedding for her, and you add those costs for the catering on your food budget, money that you spent for food that year, it might bump your budget up $50,000, right? But they take all of those expense reports for the state and they combine them and come up with a per diem rate. So it's unlikely that your $50,000 is going to make enough difference so that the whole state gets a bump in the per diem. So Medicaid fraud actually comes from your standard of care. So if you've got a nursing home, kind of going back to those staffing levels, if you've got a nursing home that the care is so bad that it's not really care at all, and you haven't earned any of your per diem, right? So that's a case where we could file, in granting that your nursing home accepts Medicaid, they don't all, but that is a case where we could file a Medicaid fraud. So going back to staffing levels, it is very important that you meet those minimums. I think the minimums are too small. That they didn't ask my opinion, so clearly they don't. But I really think that it should be bumped up a little bit. So this is where we're talking about the worthless services. False claims. Here's another one for the medical part. If you've got somebody that's on Medicare and Medicaid and they've fallen and they've bumped their head, if you are billing for services, because there are some nursing homes that have lab machines and have X-rays and machines in the facility. So if you're billing that inappropriately, that could also be fraud. Medicaid fraud is if you have submitted or caused to be submitted a false claim. So even though you didn't push the button to say, I wanted this claim, but you filled out paperwork or you did some direction to get it done, then that's a Medicaid fraud. Okay, drug diversion.
There was any questions over there?
Oh, is there any questions?
Doesn't look like it. Hopefully everybody at home is not asleep right now. You're awake. I know you're awake. Drug diversion. Like I said earlier, drug diversion is actually a technical term, but the DEA defines diversion as the act of diverting, rerouting, redirecting, or appropriating an illicit drug from its original course or purpose. Illicit drug, which means basically, for the nursing home side of things, that's going to be the prescriptions that the doctors are ordering for the patients, right? And we're talking about the narcotics, all right? If you have a lot of Advil or Tylenol being stolen, well, that is a problem. But right now, we're really concerned about the narcotics. That's what's really being targeted. They also define, the DEA defines it as diversion, the use of prescription drugs for recreational purposes. I was talking about the illicit drug. I actually made a funny one day on accident while I was presenting. I said illicit. Well, you know what the difference between that is, right? Illicit, it's like your meth and your cocaine and stuff like that. I will tell you, you will have that stuff probably come into your facility as well. All right, and that is a problem. I've been working drug diversion cases and have my eye on a nurse down south Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, and somebody else is like, oh no, it's that nurse over there. I'm like, why do you say it's that nurse? Well, she was passed out the other day on the nurse's station desk. She was high on meth. I'm like, what? Did you call the cops? No, we just left her there. Don't do that, please. Call the cops. Get those people out of your facility. Because if you leave them there, if you have knowledge of that and you left them there and a patient gets hurt, or again, going back to the neglect side of things, the unreasonable risk of harm, that can come back on you as an administrator, okay? So what you need to know, drug diversion does occur in nursing homes. Yes, it does. It's really rampant, I'll tell you that. I don't want to say you don't trust anybody, but when you're dealing with narcotics, people are going to obtain those in different ways using, deception and trickery and things like that. Residents are considered easy targets. I mean, a lot of residents won't be able to tell you what type of medications they're taking and when they take it. or that some of them have no idea what they take. They're just taking medications. That's all I know. Persons diverting the medications have no limitations. People who have drug addictions, and like what Mykel talked about earlier, addictions in general, the gambling, is equivalent to the exploitation, right? Drug addiction is parallel to the drug diversion. If they have that addiction, they don't care. They don't think about who they're harming to get their fix, all right? They are just going there stealing it no matter what. So you must take, as a facility, you have to take the proactive approaches. You have to be ahead of the game, or try to be ahead of the game. Sometimes you're going to lose that battle, as we've seen in the United States. We have lost some of the war on drugs, unfortunately, but you have to keep fighting and making sure that you're doing everything you can to try to prevent that diversion from happening. When does the diversion happen? Anywhere the worker has access to medication, anywhere that there's breakdown in the system, the chain of custody, anywhere in the facility. Your med carts, where should those be? Are they supposed to go into a patient's room?
No.
No, they're supposed to stay in the hallway, right? Or locked in a med room if for some reason it has to be off the hall. It should never go into the patient's room or into a closet. There's the janitor's closet or whatnot. Do what?
Not just no.
Yeah. It's very easy. I mean, those med carts sit out in the common areas, right? And one of the common mistakes is those locks get left unlocked. Well, anybody, that opens the door to anybody to come in there, open that drawer, because most people know where those narcotics are kept. They should be kept behind two locking keys. The first lock is you should have a narcotics drawer, right? Most time, if they don't lock one, they're probably not going to lock the other one. So you can have family members come there and steal the narcotics, or you're going to have your own employees in internal thefts, okay? So make sure your people are keeping everything locked down and secured. Medications that are commonly diverted are your PRN medications. That's pro rata, that's Latin for as needed. It's the ones that we see frequently go missing. Why is that? Because the residents aren't always needing those medications, right? They're only needing them when they have some pain going on or something. So there's always a bulk supply of PRN medications and narcotics on your carts. And honestly, it's very simple for a nurse or a med aide to go up there and write out, so-and-so needed this narcotic, and put it in her pocket and walk away, okay? It's very simple, actually. The majority of the diverted medications are your pain relievers and tranquilizers. We have morphine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, oxycontins, just anything that is basically a controlled substance that's in your facility. We see a lot of it. The fentanyl duragesic patches, a lot of nurses have been found to go in there and rip those off patients and chew them, put them in their mouth and start sucking the fentanyl out of them. If you want somebody to go to you very quickly, that's the way to do it. You're probably going to find that nurse passed out, probably barely breathing if they do that, but it happens. And a lot of times we'll see, I've had cases, and I think some other people have had cases in our office where these people jump from facility to facility. They'll get fired from this facility and then they'll go to the next facility and they're doing the same thing. And that's kind of a breakdown of the system of itself, because that facility that terminated them is not reporting it to the proper authorities to try to stop that from happening anywhere else. It's just a whole, we're just going to worry about us and not everybody else type mentality in a sense. If you have somebody stealing narcotics, report them to the police department, call us, let us investigate.
Well, and I think that the thing to remember here is you don't have to know that they're stealing the drugs, all right? If you think that they are, then let us know. That's, I think, one of the big hangups with a lot of nursing homes is they suspect that, this person took drugs, but we can't really prove it. And so they would rather just terminate them for whatever reason, you were late for work or whatever, terminate them and not report. We have a case that actually she was in court this morning where she was a temporary from temporary agencies, and she went to 5 different nursing homes, was assigned to them. She stole drugs at every single one. Well, they never did report her. Finally, they reported her because she was passed out at the nurse's station. And they get to looking at camera footage and things, and they see her, maybe not that nursing home, but the next one where they see her on camera popping out pills. The one where she passed out, she had signed out PRN medicine. This happened at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and she'd already signed out for the 5 and the 6 o'clock dosage. So, I mean, it was pretty easy to show that she's the one doing this. So just because you don't know that someone's doing it doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least refer it to us. Go ahead and send it over.
Yeah, our guys are experts at looking over the documentation and being able to identify where something went missing and being able to track down who that was. So, you know, if you don't want to worry about that, send it over. We'll take care of that. Yeah, Mykel reminded me of the nurse. I feel like I keep saying this. A facility just right down the street. Y'all are gonna be like on your master later going, wait, what? No, that's right. I think they were all news releases. So you probably figured that out. You know, but a nurse, she had got ahead of the game. And we're on, I think, she was ordering these narcotics, and she was actually putting them in her purse before they even went on the med card. Okay, and by the time it was said and done, she had stolen around 3,800 hydrocodone pills. Okay, and she was using them, by the way. She was actually, when I pulled her in, she confessed to eating upwards of 30 pills a day. Hydrocodone 10-325 is the highest hydrocodone pills you can get, and she was functioning like normal. Which brings up another point. I'm trying not to see too many squirrels here. If somebody's using them while they're on duty too, that's a problem. Okay, because again, it goes back to neglect issues. So who is capable of diverting drugs? Anyone. Well, I love this picture. I just, yeah. No, I haven't seen your pills, but have you seen the dragons in the kitchen? Why nursing home? We kind of talked about this. It's because the bulk of the medication, the narcotics that come into the facilities. I mean, you have thousands of narcotics over the year coming into your facility, all right? And they come in blister cards of 30, 60, 90, and sometimes they'll come in 3 packaged together for 180 pills or whatever. They're easy to throw in a nurse's purse or shove down the pants and walk right out the door. We didn't work this case, but it was happening before I heard about it. Somebody actually came to the facility, walked through the front door. Apparently they knew nursing homes. They knew the cart set out in the hall. They grabbed the cart, walked it right out the back door, threw it in the pickup truck bed, and took off. So, you know, I don't know if that was an inside job or not, but it wasn't something that we worked with. That happens too. Purchasing the bulk medications is very cost effective. I mean, 1 hydrocodone pill is pennies when you're purchasing in bulk. Okay, and then most every medication found in the pharmacy is found in your nursing home. Your nursing home could literally be a pharmacy in and of itself. So, and people know this. We have people that go out and it's easy. I don't want to make med-aids look, you know, like they don't know anything or anything like that. But it's easy to go get your med-aid certification, right? A couple weeks of a course, and you can get certified. We have people that know this out there in the public. And they know how easy it is to get access to that in the nursing homes. They go get their Med-Aid license and they go to the nursing home and start working just so they can feed their addiction. Or not just an addiction, but make extra money on the side.
Well, and one thing too, John's going to show you kind of the way that drugs run through the facility. But one of the things that we have found is kind of a red flag is if you've got a CMA that wants to work the night shift, that is, you know, ready to cover somebody else's shift at night. That's when we find that pills are mostly stolen. People are sleeping. They don't really take note that, you know, that Med-Aid is wandering the halls or whatever. And so when we talk about, and I think John will get to it here in a little bit, there are some red flags on what you should note. If you've got a resident that doesn't normally take their PRN pills. I mean, they've got it, but they don't normally take it. And all of a sudden they're taking one every time this particular nurse is working. When she's off shift, strangely enough, they don't need it, but when she's on shift, they do need it. Those are some of the red flags, and John will talk about those in a minute.
You'll see those indicators very clearly, as long as your nursing staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing with the documentation. Okay, it's about documentation. It helps to help control these narcotic issues. You know, you'll see that nurse's name or that med-aid's name just right down the list, and then you'll have one different person, because again, like Michael said, that resident doesn't necessarily take those narcotics all that, you know, that much. But then again, after that name, it's just the same person again, right? Red flags. You got to, just like the money, you know, control, making sure that there's no exploitation or anything, or financial neglect. Same thing with the drug diversion. You have to have oversight on these narcotics in your facility, because it will happen to you. This actually, I will say this: the drugs will probably go missing a lot faster than the money will. So, let's see here. Inventory control and oversight. Excuse me. Procedures for storage. We kind of just touched over this. Just make sure you're following everything that you can. The inventory controls are accurate. The documentation for the Medicaid counts are accurate. Do not just sit there and go, oh, you know, my people got a handle. No, you really need to sometimes, you know, just keep people on their toes. Probably go with them through the medication book sometime, just so your staff knows that you're checking. Okay, I know you guys are going to have a lot on your plates to do as administrator, but again, you guys have the weight of that facility on your shoulders. You better make sure your facility is running as smoothly as possible without any hiccups. Medications are kept in a designated medication room or cart, and it's under a lock and key. It needs to be under a lock and key. Again, about the trust issues with people. I'm working a case right now. I can't give you very many details on it, but the director of nursing was basically saying, I don't want any overflow in the carts. Just bring all the overflow to me. I'm going to lock it in my safe in my office. So it's under 2 locks and keys, my office door and the safe. That director of nursing had a drug addiction problem. He stole over 5,000 pills, okay, because of that. Again, don't trust just one person with these narcotics. Make sure there's oversight. Authorized personnel only. And then does the CMA nurse always maintain this control of the keys? It is never an excuse for the CMA to say, are we running you out of here?
I'm sorry, my group maybe
No.
had a seizure.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
So, you know, it's never an excuse for the med-aid to say, well, the nurse came to me and said she needed my keys, so I gave them to her. That's unacceptable. Those med-aids are trained that you don't give those keys over, okay? If they already give those keys over, there should be a medication cart count, and then those keys get handed over. All right, so make sure that's not happening. This is the diagram Michael was talking about. So how are narcotics? How do they flow through a facility? Well, the order gets put in, it goes to the distributor, and then it comes by courier to the nursing home where there's a delivery receipt. So the nurse is signing it in, or the med-aid signing it in. Again, like I said earlier, that one nurse this is where she was stealing them. It then goes to the log in the books and the cart, on the cart, and also in the med room. And then you have your 8-hour verification sheet. So once it's on the med cart, and every shift change, some people call it something different. But we usually refer to it as an 8-hour verification log. That's where shift change, the oncoming and offgoing are counting that card together to make sure it's accurate. And this is actually where a lot of times your good med-aids or your LPNs are going to go, wait a minute, Ms. Smith had 120 on the cart yesterday, but there's only 30 on the cart today. So this is where they can notice too. Hopefully you got some good people. Your MAR, your medication administration record, gets filled out once it starts getting administered, along with your individual narcotic count sheets. And then, you know, that's depending on if it's PRN or routine. And then it goes to the resident. Feed the addiction, we talked about this earlier. The addictions are powerful. People just don't care. They don't think about how they're harming residents or what could happen. Over time, the addiction grows to what was now, it used to be they were stealing a pill a day, and now they're stealing 10 pills a day, or they're stealing 100 pills a day. It keeps growing. If you have somebody who has a drug addiction in your facility and you find out about it, you need to take care of that. Okay. I'm not saying, I'm not here to give you advice. There's ways to take care of that to help them keep their job and to work out that issue. But I'll tell you right now, just from my experience, if somebody has a drug addiction, it's generally it's not good to put them back in a place to where they have ease of access again. Okay. In fact, the drug diversion of nursing homes, it impacts the resident medication, impacts not only the victims, but the healthcare system in general. Can physically and mentally harm residents through active diluting, substituting pain medication, or non-dispensing of the medications. Again, like we talked about earlier, that one LPN, she was under the influence when she was working. That could definitely harm a resident. And then fraud is committed against the Medicaid program if those pills are paid for by Medicaid funds. Employment, employers should not employ or continue employing a person addicted to any Schedule 1 through Schedule 5 drug as specified under the Uniform Controlled Dangerous Substances Act, unless that person produces evidence the person has successfully completed a drug rehabilitation program. Again, that's up for you guys to make sure that's being abided by. And like I said earlier, it's very dangerous to put somebody back in a position where there's ease of access. Electronic monitoring. This goes hand in hand with drug diversion. I love surveillance cameras in facilities. It makes your job easier, and it makes my job easier. I can come look at those videos and typically have the case solved in a matter of days. So can you install a camera in a residence room? Yes, but you have to make sure you know what you're doing. You have to obtain the written authorization in writing from the resident or the resident's representative to do so. And then you also have to provide written notice that the electronic monitoring is elective and can be declined. Can you install electronic monitoring equipment in common areas? Yes. We don't, by the way, on the residence room, we don't see the facilities installing a lot of cameras in an individual's room, but we do have a lot of family members that install hidden cameras in rooms. Okay, we even as an office have the ability to come in and install those cameras as well. But it's caught a lot of thefts. It's caught abuse over the years. I mean, they're very handy to have if something is suspected. So in common areas, yes, you can. If you choose to place electronic monitoring anywhere in the facility, you must post a sign near the main entrance to the facility that explains there's monitoring may be in use. You don't have to sit there and tell them exactly where the cameras are. It just has to be a sign that says electronic monitoring in use on property or something along those lines, okay? Last thing you want to do is start pointing out where all your cameras are so somebody can go and mess with them. Can you install a video in their room? Can a resident, install a video in the room? Yes. Of course, they have to go through the representatives and kind of similar facts. They're required to notify you that the device is in the room and complete a consent form. And then the resident, if they have a roommate, they have to get written permission from the other occupant in the room as well. What happens if you remove or tamper with an electronic device? Intentionally tampering or moving a device, if it's a misdemeanor crime they're trying to hide, it's a misdemeanor and a fine up to $5,000. If it's tampering with a device to avoid detection of the misdemeanor offense, it's still a misdemeanor. It's imprisonment up to 1 year in the county jail, up to a $5,000 fine, and on both. Moving or tampering with a device to avoid detection of a felony offense, well, that's a felony. It's up to 5 years in prison, up to a $10,000 fine, and on both. How serious is it? You want to take it? Yeah. All right.
All right, so this is the part where, and I'm going to go fairly quickly through here, but when we talk about abuse, neglect, exploitation, those are crimes. This is the serious nature of the crime, okay? So abuse, neglect, exploitation is punishable up to 10 years in jail, in prison, plus a fine or both. This one right here, this box down here is what kind of catches people off guard. So it is an 85% crime, and that means that you must serve 85% of your sentence before you are eligible for parole, probation, whatever. So let's say that you're sent to prison, or one of your workers is sent to prison for 10 years, they have to serve 8.5 before they can ever be considered to get out. The other thing that is important is they must serve the first 30 days in county jail. So if you are convicted, it doesn't matter if it's a suspended, a deferred, it does not matter. Your first 30 days is in county jail. I don't know if any of you have ever been in the Oklahoma County Jail, but it's nasty. I toured it when I was an intern in the DA's office. And I mean, I felt like I had to shower when I got out. I would hate to even be to visit there. So it's not a nice place. I don't know many county jails that are, but Oklahoma County is just extra bad.
Never been a nice one.
Yeah. John's been in more than I have.
Not as an inmate, though. Oh, it's because I clicked on it. There we go.
There we go. All right. For non-caretakers, so early on we had what a caretaker is. If it's just somebody that, for example, we had a son that was the caretaker of his dad. The son's wife lived in the home. She was actually a registered nurse. She was a SANE nurse. And she lived there too, but she allowed this neglect to go on. We charged her. And her punishment was up to 2 years, but she's also got the same extra level of punishment. Sexual abuse is 15 years, same red box. Verbal abuse, believe it or not, is just a misdemeanor. Remember we were talking about language, gestures, yelling at somebody, calling them stupid, things like that's just a misdemeanor. And it's up to 1 year and $1,000. And oddly enough, you don't have to do 30 days for that. When we were actually advocating for the personal degradation statute to have that added, one of the legislators called, and that was his concern, was, well, what if it's just, yelling at somebody? And I said, well, like we have it, that's already taken care of. That's not what we're talking about. So it ended up. All right. An exploitation. Elderly person, anybody over 62, whether you're competent or not, but that depends on the amount that you've stolen, the amount you've taken. So if it's at 100,000 or more, it's up to 15 years. If it's less, it's up to 10 years. And remember, when we say up to 10, that means 0 to 10 years. It really can mean you're convicted, but you don't ever go to prison. You don't do it. Drug diversion, John said earlier, when we talk about drug diversion, we're actually talking about larceny, which is a theft of a controlled dangerous substance. It's 0 to 10 years. It is a felony. And then if you're obtaining it by fraud, is different than stealing it. So the example that John gave where he had a nurse or a CMA call in, this was back before all of the restrictions were there, but they had somebody that would call in the drugs and they'd say, I'll go get them for you. I'd be happy to go get the medication. And they go to there's not really a prescription. They made it up. They go to the pharmacy, they get all the medicine, and then they take out the drugs that they ordered. That's actually obtaining by fraud. It's a felony up to 10 years. When we're talking, taking it outside of a nursing home situation, obtaining by fraud could be where somebody's gone into a doctor's office and stolen their prescription pad. That's all, and written themselves a prescription. That's also obtaining by fraud. All right, so we haven't really talked about this, but let's talk about murder a little bit. Homicide, whatever you want to call it. We actually can charge a murder in a nursing home, and I'll tell you how. So the punishment for first-degree murder is life without parole, or the death penalty. Second degree, and we don't, I will tell you, I will be shocked if we ever have a first-degree murder. So first-degree murder is the death is caused by one human against another with, it's not a term for premeditated, it's, what's the term? Malice of forethought. What I'm trying to think of. You're like, what?
I'm like, that's one of those attorneys, you know.
Well, manslaughter is different. Malice of forethought is really a big term for intent. So even an intent can be formed in a second. So I'm gonna go fight John, all right? I'm mad at John, all I wanna do is fight him. But then I get so mad, I pull my gun and I shoot John. Even though the fight started and I didn't intend to kill him, but I did it, that's still malice of forethought because I intentionally killed him. What?
But it's not premeditated.
Actually, premeditated is not a legal term.
All right.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's because it could be used when we're talking about second-degree murder, which is not malice of forethought, but it is heat of passion. So I was so angry, I was so mad at you, like my example, that I'm going to kill you, and I kind of went crazy a little bit, lost my mind. But that is, you had to have done it while in the heat of passion. So John threatens me, and I go, and he says, next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. Well, we get in a fight, John walks off. If I go after John and shoot him, that's murder. That's first degree murder. If John, in the heat of battle, decides, like a fist fight, in a bar fight, that could be a heat of passion murder. Okay. The other type of murder is you've got felony murder. So there's first degree felony murder, which is a series of crimes. So if you're talking about a robbery, burglary in the first degree, arson, rape in the first degree, those particular ones, if somebody dies while you're doing those acts, that's a first degree felony murder. Every other felony is a second degree felony murder. So caretaker, abuse, and neglect is another felony. If somebody dies in the course of that type of action, it's second degree felony murder. So what that means is if you've got somebody in your nursing home who, we had an example earlier where the person was, didn't get cared for all day. Let's say that because of that lack of care, she had a heart attack or she had a stroke. Nobody cared for her. She could have been saved, but she wasn't. That's felony murder. And we've actually charged it one time. We had a couple of people that were in a nursing home. They had a person that was a two-person assist, or I think it was they were supposed to use the lift, but they pick her up, they drop her on the floor, and they were like, oops, okay, well, let's pick her back up. They put her back in bed and she had broken her leg. She had broken her femur. Because of that blood clot, she died. We charged the murder. We ended up pleading it to just the abuse or the neglect because the family asked us not to pursue it. But we were ready to go. We would have totally gone. So anyway, so that's second degree felony murder. It's 10 years. All right. So let's talk real briefly about additional. You may have any questions about that.
I was going to, how would you apply that to the person who got locked in the cabinet for 3 days and then died because of that? Is that
That's absolutely felony murder. And it is, if you've got somebody that's locked in a cabinet or not cared for, so there has to be a nexus between the death and what happened. And that, to me, is very clearly, but for that happening, but for her being in there, she would not die. So it's really, if you ask yourself that question, but for this action, would this person be dead? Sometimes it's not so easy to answer. You know, for example, the lack of care. Well, she was going to have the stroke or the heart attack anyway. The lack of care didn't cause the stroke or the heart attack, but the lack of care certainly prevented assistance or prevented medical care. And so we could probably make that connection, that nexus.
Yeah, another one would be, suppose as a CNA, I'm in charge of this resident, and then knowing that I'm supposed to go in every 2 hours, or for almost 6 hours, I didn't go in and just raised the bed, and the person's in bed, and after the whole day when I came back to access it, checking if the resident was out of the way, I trapped between the bed rail and passed away.
We've had that too.
So how would that be called? Would I be a charge of first degree or second degree murder? Or is it a felony?
If that's all the facts, I'm going to say that's probably just a neglect. And the reason why is there an intervening event? So can I say that your lack of care was the reason for the death? Maybe. But there are other people, the food staff, are there intervening people? And usually there are. Does that make sense? But yeah, ultimately you could be charged with second degree felony murder. So. Okay, additional concerns. These are other consequences that you intuitively, you probably know these things can happen. So there's civil penalties, administrative sanctions, you could get your license pulled, the loss of the contract. Department of Health could come in and say, we're not gonna license your nursing home anymore. And so that's, then there's also the exclusion from federal programs. That's mostly for Medicaid fraud. So does everybody know what like a deferred sentence and a suspended sentence? Do you know what the difference in those are? Let me tell you just briefly, just so we're clear. So a deferred sentence, you're actually deferring the imposition of the sentence. So you're not actually convicted of anything, okay? So we're deferring your judgment and sentence. What that means is if you violate you're still on probation. If you violate your probation, then the state could come in and accelerate that sentence to anything in that range of punishment. So we were talking about drug diversion, and it's up to 10 years, or abuse or neglect, up to 10 years. So let's say that you get a deferred sentence for 3 years. In year 2 years and 6 months, you commit another crime, you violate your probationary. We can then sentence you to up to 10 years. So a suspended sentence is you're deferring, because a suspended sentence is you are a convicted felon and you are to serve 10 years in the Department of Corrections. But we're going to suspend that sentence. We're not going to actually send you. A suspended sentence, unlike a deferred, it could, you would only have that sentence that you've originally been offered. So a suspended sentence, you got a 5-year suspended. And you serve 3 years and 6 months. Well, you only have a year and 6 months that could be revoked and you go to prison. Okay. So those are actually, well, there's a fourth one, which is just a deferred prosecution. But when we're talking about sentences, there's deferred, a suspended, and there's a time to do. Okay. So and the reason why I tell you this is for the exclusion from federal programs to Medicaid fraud, it doesn't matter. Remember, deferred is not a conviction. It doesn't matter. You can still get kicked out of all federal programs. Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, all of them. And then finally, one of the other bigger things is these financial costs. So you're gonna have to get out of bail, you're gonna have to get out of jail, bond, you'll have court costs, and you'll have attorney's fees, and those can be a lot. a lot. And then remember, the folks that are convicted of abuse, neglect, exploitation, there's 30 days in county jail. How are you going to work when you're in county jail? So you've got that other loss. So OSBI and background checks, I'm not going to go into this a lot because I'm sure that you will have gotten this someplace else. But remember, you have to do background checks, and you cannot hire people that have been convicted of rape or murder. You can hire people that have been convicted of this if their sentence within 7 years of the expiration of their sentence. So what that means is, going back to my example of you got a 3-year sentence and you served a year. So even though they got out of jail or they never served any jail time at all, you have to wait the 3 years, then you have to wait another 7 before you can hire them. Okay, so it is 7 years after the expiration of their sentence.
So roughly it's like almost like 10 years.
It could be more. I mean, if they got a 10-year deferred or a 7-year deferred sentence, then it's now 14 years. Yeah. So just, make sure you do your math right. Some of these, I don't know why you would want. If you've got somebody that's been convicted of assault and battery, do you want them in your nursing home? I know help is hard to come by, but anyway. You're guilty of a misdemeanor and you can go to jail for if you hire somebody that's on that list. And the owners there's some financial implications for them. A violation is cost them a daily rate. And the money actually goes, and this is one that I didn't know if you know this, John, but found out just not too long ago that the fines that the Healthcare Authority or the Department of Health impose upon nursing homes actually goes into a fund, and then with some type of regulations, it goes back out to the nursing homes. I don't know how all that business, but I thought that.
Well, I touched on the slide before. It's a misdemeanor if you hire somebody you shouldn't that was convicted of those, right? But if you hired that person knowing that they had been convicted, and then that person harmed somebody in your nursing home, well, you could be facing a neglect charge on top of that misdemeanor. Okay, so it's just not a misdemeanor. If a resident gets hurt because that person you hired, it could come back to you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and then we've kind of talked about this. These are when the survey teams go in, and I think you haven't gotten to talk about those, but the survey teams are from the Department of Health. If there's a no immediate jeopardy, if there's a rating, then the fine can be $50,000 to $3,000 a day. But if there is an immediate jeopardy, if they come in and they say, the immediate jeopardy is staffing levels. You don't have enough people to care for it. Then the nursing home is fined, could be up to $10,000 a day. And then, of course, you can lose your job, which is bad that you went through all of this. All right. We got 10 minutes.
All right. So how can abuse, neglect, exploitation, or diversion happen in your facility? We kind of covered a lot of it, but these are a little bit extra. So underreporting of crimes is a big issue for us, especially the victims. A lot of times the victims are not confident enough to report it themselves, or they might be embarrassed or ashamed. They could be afraid of the perpetrator, knowing that that person's caring for them and could do anything to them and cause them harm. When we're talking about these elderly victims and the vulnerable adults, it really is, it's underreported. I'm just leaving it at that because they just are too afraid or scared to do so. Perpetrators know the hurdles of prosecuting elder abuse. They know the recanting victim, the consent defense, the incompetent victim. All of these hurdles could be known to them, but if you read the red down here, it says perpetrators may not know that we could convict even without the assistance of the victim. We don't need the victim. Okay, if the victim has died or expired, why while we're working the case, it's okay. We don't need the victim to go ahead and prosecute. You have something to say?
Go ahead.
Okay.
It's the next slide.
Documents that could be evidence. Anytime you suspect a criminal action, you should be collecting documentation to assist with any law enforcement investigations. That's financial documents, could be the unfinished repair bills, telemarketing fraud. A lot of things you're going to deal with in nursing homes going to be the deeds or the title of the properties, any type of bank statements or anything like that, wills and trusts. Make sure you collect those and keep those, in a secure file to give to law enforcement.
So this is aside from the documents, because the documents are what they are. What we have is a thing called evidence-based prosecution. And what that is a couple of things that are exceptions to the hearsay rule in court. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement made by somebody other than who's on the witness stand. They're offering it for the matter of the truth asserted. So they're saying, in a car wreck, I was standing there with my buddy and I saw that the blue car hit the red car. So if you've got somebody on the stand and he says, well, did you see that blue car hit the red car? You got somebody on the stand who was not that person. They didn't see that car, but their buddy told them about it. That's hearsay. These are exceptions. So an excited utterance, going back to my car wreck. Man, did you see that car? And so, and the police get there and they say, it was crazy and that person flew out of the car and this is what happened. They're very excited. And so the theory is an excited person is more likely to tell the truth than somebody that's just stone cold. And so an exception to the hearsay rule, I could have you come on the stand and say, my resident she was just frantic. Her baby doll had gotten smashed. She was frantic and she tells me that those guys did it. You can get onto the stand and say the resident doesn't have to. And the other one is a 911 call. There is a Sixth Amendment right to confront your accusers. However, a 911 call generally is not a testimonial. You don't make a 911 call because you're trying to testify in court. You make it because you need help. So the 911 calls are helpful. And then of course we have the medical records. This person, there was no chemical restraints. There was no bed rails, the physical restraints. None of that was authorized. And yet we find this person like that. So
I will tell you something that we don't encounter a whole lot of, but we have to happen across the United States is, we rely on the medical records to be able to prove a lot of our cases, the evidence-based prosecution, right? Thank goodness there's a huge paper trail. You got, records coming in from pharmacies or doctor's offices, and so we can go get them from there. Because sometimes facilities will get scared and they'll destroy records to try to hide things that happen, all right? Don't do that. That's a crime. And that's something we don't talk about on here, but it is a crime if you destroy those records. I think you guys have to keep the record for, 7 years or 10 years. One of the 6 years? That was, I like 7 better. So 6 years, you got to keep those records. If you lose them, destroy them, you could be in trouble for that. Don't do that. What can you do as an administrator? I love this part. Basically, it's get off your butt. Okay, let's be proactive. Don't go lock yourself in the office just because you don't want to hear the drama going on in your facility, all right? Get out of your office, walk around, be proactive. Let people know that you're watching. When you're doing that, I promise you, that is going to deter a lot. I'm not saying it's going to prevent everything from happening, but it will deter, okay? And that's what we want. We want to keep that from happening in those crimes. Proactively guarding your nursing home against bad actors, have your written policies and procedures, make sure those are pretty solid. Compliance professionals coming in, effective initial training, don't just throw them the book and say, read this, okay, you're good to go. Make sure they understand what they're reading. Continuing education, always keep that going. I think that it's a mandatory anyway for you to provide Cs.
And by the way, we also do continuing education. So if you want us to come in and do, it won't be this because we're kind of letting some of the cat out of the bag with you guys, but it'll be very similar where we say don't do these things. So we can do this.
Does it come with fees?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, my fee is $2,000. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's free of charge. It is free. It is free of charge. We come out and we do give away freebies and more freebies. We have a lot of stuff to give. And, you know, because we want to get ahead of the game. As the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, we are trying to be proactive in preventing the abuse and neglect and all these that we're talking about, right? That's why we're teaching you. Like Mykel said, we don't share this information with all your CNAs and CMAs and LPNs. Okay, that's for you guys. Effective communication, man. That's I think that's with any type of business. As long as you have effective communication, you can make things go right. Internal monitoring. Talking about the documentation and keeping that and some evidence. I was going to mention earlier, if you have surveillance cameras in your facility, you have an incident caught on those cameras, burn that quickly to a flash drive or a CD. Okay, don't leave it on your system. It'll be overwritten and be lost for good. And know how to operate your system. There's too many times they go into a facility and they're like, we don't know how to do it. It's your system. You should know how. Okay, but keep that as well as evidence.
I got a question about that.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a certain flash drive? Because I remember in another facility I worked at, it had to be some kind of special flash drive. Do you know what that is?
Well,
If you say video.
It doesn't have to be a special flash drive for us to get it from you guys, okay? It doesn't have to be able to be encrypted or anything like that. You're giving it to us or to other law enforcement. So, you're not going to be in violation of HIPAA or anything like that when you do that, all right? So just a standard flash drive will work, or a CD will work, whatever you can burn it to your DVD and give it to us, just as long as we get it. Make sense? All right, and prompt responses. Don't just sit there when you hear about something. Okay, be prompt. Get on top of it. Don't let it get out of control. Reporting the incident to the appropriate authorities. Again, reporting. It's important for your people to report to you. It's important for you to report to us and to OSDH. Cover your bases. You can't report to too little, right? You report to all of us, because OSDH might get it from your state reportable, but it might be months before we get that report and are able to come out and investigate. The faster we get it, the faster we can get on top of it, and hopefully keep that person from moving to another facility causing harm or stealing narcotics. Okay. Helpful hints, work suggestions. Get out of your office, like I said. Take care of the residents personally. Demand the same from your staff. You don't want abusers working in your facility. You do not. You have social media these days. You don't want your facility to have a black eye and be the talk of the town. Okay. Put cameras on the medication carts or in common areas, I'd say. And then RNs, LPNs should be the only ones to really be distributing narcotics, but we know that's not really efficient or economical because CMAs are a little bit cheaper to come by. And then what do you do if you suspect bad behavior? Report it immediately. You have no option in that. If you don't report it, you have committed a crime. Who to report to? I think you've already known this. OSDH, us, local law enforcement, follow your guidelines. And then what else we got? What else should you do? Document thoroughly. We always say if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. If you have the burden to prove that if you didn't write it down. Take pictures, all that good stuff. Why should you document? Well, there you go. Program integrity, provider protection. The most important reason is for the patient health and safety. And then, whoa.
This answers your question.
State law requires you to maintain records. There we go. That's what we're talking about. There's the 6 years. You got to maintain the medical records for 6 years. Or any records, I'd say. Mitigating drug diversion starts with the employee screening process. We've already talked about that. Just make sure you know who you're hiring and keep an eye on everybody who has access to those narcotics and are administering them. Okay. Mitigation continued. Basically, can you read the signatures on the records? Make sure it's all legible. Make sure your staff are aware of all the criminal implications. A lot of staff just think, oh, I'll just lose my job and I'll go right down the street and get hired as a CNA or an LPN there. Well, it's more than that, as you've seen today. And then what can we do to help you as a Medicaid Fraud Control Unit? Well, when you report it to us, again, we'll come out and investigate. We take care of that. We are a criminal investigation division. You know, we're here for you guys. We want to make sure you guys succeed and have a good facility and that you guys are protecting those patients. Okay. And then, you know, again, we provide in-service training. If you need it, call us. We'll come out and it's an hour long. We'll go through it and help your people understand what they can face, and also have a little fun and, you know, laugh. And then if you want advice on how to make your oversight of medications be more effective, you can call us and we'll walk you through that as well. There it is, folks. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, we have our Oklahoma City office here, and then we have our Tulsa office. And then we have, of course, the hotline to report to. Make sure you have those down, have these posted in your facility. That way anybody can do that, and we'll be happy to help out. Anything else? Any questions?
Have you guys had any cases involving COVID? I was
Yeah.
wondering.
Oh,
Because
Lord.
everything's COVID these days.
Yeah,
but-
everything's COVID. What we have found out normally is as long as your infectious disease policy is in place and you're following CDC guidelines, you're going to be fine. What we have found, like there was one, it was actually a veterans center that had a whole bunch of cases. And what we found was an asymptomatic person had come in. Didn't know it. So, I mean, that's going to happen. It's just going to happen. What we, again, the CDC guidelines. So, you know, quarantine people that are showing symptoms, check temperatures, do all of those things, and you should be okay. But unfortunately, it's going to get in the nursing homes. It just is. I think there for a while, all visitation had stopped. We had some nursing homes that were, you know, telling their people, just live here, don't go out. I don't know that that was helpful either. It's just follow your policies, follow CDC policies, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, it goes back to what I kind of said earlier when talking about some of this other stuff. It's how did you handle it?
Right.
Right? I mean, we're fighting an invisible enemy. You're not going to be able to stop it from coming in. But how do you handle it? Do you follow the CDC guidelines? And also, just to let you know, some people think that that keeps us out of your facility. Well, if we have a crime that occurred in your facility, we actually have jurisdiction to step in there. Okay, so you can't keep us out, but we do take our precautions, and when we come in and things like that. So we don't want to come in. We don't want to be the ones that actually bring something in. But if we have to, we will step in your facility and take care of business. So, all right.
Yeah, if we're just going to ask for records, we'll meet you out in the parking lot or something. We're not going to. It's like. We've gotten reports of no air conditioning, no, or too much air conditioning or something like that. And we'll go in and we'll have to check it. We've got little thermometers and, if this particular room is 85 degrees, we need to know why. Is it because your air conditioner's broken? That's an abuse. You got to get those people. They have, they have to be comfortable. So anyway, any other questions?
Any questions? Anybody from online?
There was a couple earlier.
I saw there's some comments. I'm not quite sure if that was a question. But yeah. All right. Well, appreciate your time. I'm guessing you take a break.
Yeah, they said next session's at 2:15.